Hello, welcome back to the First Gnostic Church of Christ, and we are now on video 10, Read and Commentary. In our last video, we discussed the process of restoration. That's section 15 of this great book. We discussed the concept of baptism and forgiveness or confession of sins. You may want to go back and really listen to that if you haven't gotten a chance to yet, as it's very good in describing what is the symbolism behind those two actions or rituals when it comes to salvation and redemption. And that leads us up to the last section of this great book, section 16, titled Redemption of the Calling. Before I get started, I also want to point your attention to the additional video that I posted this past week titled Dispelling the Myths of Gnostic Christianity. I am responding to a request by one of our subscribers, and I created the video as a response to a YouTube video that was posted regarding early Christian Gnosticism as well as current Christian Gnosticism. So let me know if you like that series or you feel that it's not necessary for this channel, as my main goal is to read through the Gnostic text and to provide commentary so we can better understand the text, so we can then approach the canonical text with a Gnostic understanding more clearly and concisely. Ideally would like for you to be able to formulate your own understandings and be able to create your own debates and responses to situations that may arise, so that you'll be able to walk out into the world and share the good news and be able to respond to the various numbers of people out there that obviously are in the majority that consider Gnosticism to be a heresy and then sometimes even the Antichrist. So I think it's important for you to be able to address some of the concerns, fears, misinformation that is out there about Christian Gnosticism. So that's why I'm providing that series of videos. But again, feel free to let me know what your thoughts are about continuing that series. All right, with that, let's go ahead and pick up section 16. Redemption of the calling. It reads here, even if on the matter of the election there are many more things for us to say, as it is fitting to say, nonetheless, on the matter of those of the calling, for those of the right are so named, it is necessary for us to return once again to them, and it is not profitable for us to forget them. So we're talking about the calling, those that are called to come to earth to be an example to others back to the pleroma, that have Gnosis, that have been called to go back to the pleroma. We have spoken about them. If there is enough in what preceded at some length, how have we spoken? In a partial way, since I said about all those whom came forth from the Logos, either from the judgment of the evil ones, or from the wrath which fights against them, and the turning away from them, which is the return to the exalted ones, or from the prayer and the remembrance of those who pre-existed, or from hope and faith that they would receive their salvation from good work, since they have been deemed worthy because they are beings from the good dispositions. Now, this seems to imply that there were those that already had Gnosis that came back in flesh form on the reincarnation wheel for a specific purpose, and it seems to be going into what that purpose is. Along with some of the other discussions we've had in the past, I might include that they're here again to assist all the other types of human beings toward Gnosis. So it continues, that they have cause of their begetting, which is an opinion from the one who exists. Still further I said that before the Logos concerned himself with them in an invisible way, willingly the exalted one added to this thought, because they were in need of him who was the cause of their being. They did not exalt themselves when they were saved, as if there were nothing existing before them, but they confess that they have a beginning to their existence, and they desire this to know him who exists before them. So in other words, even though they may have already been in the pleroma, they still decided to come here so they could experience the Christ through in the canoma, and also to assist the Christ. And some of those would be the apostles, so forth and so on, any saints that may come along, or those that get Gnosis right away. And you do very occasionally see people that have the healing touch or have the gifts of the Spirit or are very wonderful people to be around. It's like being around light. These are likely people that have come here, kind of like a avatar or a Vista, a type of God in the flesh, if you will, similar to Christ, but little Christos, smaller Christ, that have visited among us, but already have had the fullness of Gnosis, but made the decision to have a extension or growth of their name. And so they came here to gain further experience and to experience the Christ and also to assist others. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that those individuals may recall that they have come here. Some may have memory of that, have memory of past lives, or some may have felt that they were called to come here even. They may have felt that they were with God before and may have vivid dreams about that, so forth and so on. But for the most part, most of us are not so good at being able to tap into our eternal selves from the past. It gets murkier and murkier, of course, as you go further back toward the pleroma at the beginning of the human emanation by the ineffable or the totalities. But just know that part of what will help you tap into some of this isn't necessarily to go to a reader and get a past lives regression kind of reading, but to meditate on truth, and sometimes it may require seeking some form of enlightenment or talking with people that maybe have experienced that themselves. And I know that one really good country for that is India. They have a lot of accounts of people that have claims of past lives, and they have a kind of spiritual system set up where I do think that they're much more able to tap into that because of what they prioritize through time and what they understand and how to tap into that. Clearly, one of the best ways to tap into that is to continually practice getting in touch with the infinite or the ineffable through meditation and prayer. Also doing a journal about your dreams and visions that you may have, or vague memories, or even premonitions or deja vu, things like that. Like you felt like you maybe have been somewhere before, or you maybe felt like you know someone. Even talking to soulmates can sometimes bring up common interests that you have, or coincidences, or you might say the same thing even though you just met. Things like that are timeless and can both help you to see the circumstances or the environment in which both of you are in that may be somehow remanifesting itself in this incarnation and in this expression of the universes that exist. So those are ways you can consider about how you might tap back into thinking about your past life. But I'm saying all this again to go back to, there are beings that come and they just have that right away. It's like a child prodigy of sorts. And some of the examples of that could be Gandhi or Martin Luther King, Buddha, presuming that he existed, so forth and so on. Those are examples of people that right away they're just beyond the average human being. So it would incline one to believe that they've gained some kind of enlightenment or wisdom that was above and beyond just this single lifetime that they're incarnated in at that moment that they're here. So those are things that also you might want to read on, or about autobiographies, about some of those great spiritual teachers, and see what is it about them that makes them who they are. That sometimes can tune you into further gnosis and understanding and enlightenment along your path. All right, so it goes on. It says, finishing this paragraph, most of all I said that they worshipped the revelation of the light in the form of lightning, and they bore witness that it appeared as their salvation. So what does it mean here when it talks about of the light in the form of lightning? And they bore witness that it appeared as their salvation. So again, this is what I'm referring to, is you have people that come here and they're like lightning. They come and they go in a flash, but they have profound effect on humanity. And that in of itself is like a testament to salvation, like the Christ energy working in the universe. That's what it's suggesting here. It's talking about those people and how they are a revelation to humanity, and they're bearing witness to the Christ energy in the universe, that it's at work. And it's like when all the pieces are falling down, it looks like the humanity is going to collapse, whether it's wars or racism or India, for example. Then along comes this person just out of nowhere, like a flash of lightning, right? Bearing witness to the light, bearing witness to the salvatory energy in the universe. So that's what's referring to here. So he's saying, most of all, I said that they worship the revelation, and it's not they're worshiping the God. It's they're coming here to give praise to the revelation of the truth in the universe. You see, that's what it's saying. So worship the revelation of the light in the form of lightning, and they bore witness that it appeared as their salvation. So it's both their salvation, and they are a salvatory figure to other people. You can imagine the impact that Martin Luther King has had on humanity, or the impact that Gandhi had on the 1 billion people living in India, for example, and even the world over today. So these are examples of people that has come like a flash of lightning and just are these salvatory figures. They're like little Christinos walking among us that just come out of nowhere. and they typically have short lives because they're following in the footsteps of the Christ energy, which this Kanoma cannot bear, and the demiurge and its minions will not allow for that individual to stay. It will find a way to try to get rid of it as soon as it can, because it doesn't want it to spread its light, you see. So, all right, to continue, not only those who have come forth from the Logos, about whom alone we said that they would accomplish the good work, but also those whom these brought forth according to good dispositions will share in the repose according to the abundance of the grace. Also those who have been brought forth from the desire of lust for power. Now, here's the other part of this. In this universe, there's always the need for the equilibrium. That's what's called justice. Justice is, on the surface, appears to be a very beneficial expression, but justice is only necessary when there's injustice, you see. So that is what it's referring to. It's talking about the equilibrium in the universe, because if you have a Gandhi figure that comes, or a Martin Luther King figure, so forth and so on, then the universe, this universe, the Kanoma, will require a balancing of that goodness. And so this is what it's referring to as talking about there's others that came and out of power and for lust of power. And this is when you have people perhaps like Hitler or so forth and so on. This is the game this is the drama that's going on the stage of life. It's an actual play, you see, in this realm. And so it has to have these characters to make the wheel spin, to make the wheel go, and to create the momentum to continue the process of life. Because if in this realm, if you didn't have that dichotomy and the charge of the polarities, then you wouldn't have the lightning. You wouldn't have the difference in the polarity. And that lack of lightning would not allow for life to exist in this realm. It has to work according to those mechanisms, the charge, the difference between the two. So that's why a lot of people, whether they know this or not, they're very enamored with movies like Star Wars, for example, and they talk about the Force, because it is a truth. There is a force in the universe, and that's what the Revelation is talking about when it talks about the Force. People this unseen force that's moving in the universe, and people that worship that unseen force. It's essentially talking about worshiping that need of the adrenaline of this realm and everything it brings you, whether it's through power, whether it's through lust, whether it's through accolades or reputation. That makes all of your hormones and endocrine gland charge up. And that's when you know you're rooted not in the pleroma, but in the Kanoma. You're rooted deeply into the Kanoma, because that's where you're getting your energy, you're getting your charge. But when you're doing that, you're also creating a division, whether you know this or not, because you're being led by divisive forces. So it will lead to some type of division, which will lead to destruction and ending of something. Something will have to give, you see. So anyway, it goes on, it says, also those who have been brought forth from the desire of lust for power, having the seed in them, which is the lust for power, will receive the reward for their good deeds. Now notice that it talks about even the ones that are lusting after power, even they will receive karma. This is not respecter of people. It doesn't take side. It's just the logos work, the governance, the intelligence working in the universe. Its principle is merely karmic in nature, namely those who acted and those who have the predisposition toward good. If they intentionally desire and wish to abandon the vain temporal ambition, and they keep the commandment of the Lord of glory instead of the momentary honor, and inherit the eternal kingdom. Why is he bringing this up? He's saying that everybody can be called, even those that are working for darkness, whether they know they are or not. Even they can be called back to the pleroma. Now, it is necessary that we unite the causes and the effects on them of the grace and the impulses, since it is fitting that we say what we mentioned previously about the salvation of all of those of the right, of all those unmixed and those mixed, to join them with one another. Is essentially telling you that everybody has a part in this process. And Judas is a good example of that. Judas was counted as one of the apostles, even though he betrayed Christ and traded him in for some coins. And even Peter denied Christ 3 times. So Judas is a very important figure in the Bible. Perhaps of all the apostles, he's counted as one of the top 3 most important among the apostles in terms of Christ being able to fulfill his mission. So you can't think of this universe as being evil, because again, evil is an illusion. It's created by people that want to divide and conquer. We only talk about evil because evil will be if people believe there's evil. Whatever you believe is, it is, even though it may not be. So, in other words, you can imagine there's a ghost. If you really believe there's a ghost, then for you there's a ghost. Even though everybody else objectively doesn't see a ghost, and there's no proof of a ghost, in your mind there's a ghost. So, as a human race, if we all believe in evil, then there's evil for us, even though from an objective standpoint, there is no evil. Ultimately, my point in this is that we have to look at everything as having a role to play in the universe. Even Hitler, everybody has a part to play. And things don't just happen out in a vacuum. They happen as a consequence to the balancing of the right and the left, a balancing of the good and the evil. And this is what's talked about in Gnosticism, that you're not going to get just from the 66 books of the canonical text. And that is knowledge of this thing called the tree, which is the tree of knowledge of good and evil that the demiurge or Jehovah wanted to prevent Eve and Adam from partaking of, because once we understand this riddle, then we can escape it, you see. And of course, that's not what the demiurge wants. And at some point, we're going to get into why is the demiurge so transfixed on keeping us here. And there's a reason behind that, but we're going to get deeper into these Gnostic texts, and it'll start to reveal this. And we get into the origin story and John and so forth and so on. You'll be able to it'll become more clear to you, why is it so vital that he keep us here and lord over us? Why is that? All right, so goes on. And as for the repose, which is the revelation of the form in which they believe, it is necessary that we should treat it with a suitable discussion. For when we confess the kingdom which is in Christ, we escape from the whole multiplicity of forms and from inequality and change. For the end will receive a unitary existence. So it's saying that it's easy to look condescendingly upon people that don't have gnosis, or even people that are following after lust and power and all of their being attached to all these things, and maybe get ourselves all lofty and look at us, we don't have these attachments. But in reality, we were only able to arrive there because we were able to see the results of people being attached to that, or even our own personal attachments and the outcomes of those, the good and the bad that comes with that, the karma, the effect of being attached to lust for power and so forth and so on. And we came to understand that that's what brought us knowledge, the forbidden knowledge. That helps us to ever more expand into understanding not just us as individuals, ourselves as individuals, but also God in a bigger way. We begin to understand the ineffable in a much bigger way than we ever could have imagined had we not come to this realm and experienced the suffering and the death and so forth and so on. All right, so it goes on. That's what it's talking about here and how all it fits together. For the end will receive a unitary existence, just as the beginning is unitary, where there is no male nor female, nor slave and free, no circumcision and no uncircumcision, neither angel nor man, but Christ is all in all. So it's basically telling you that everybody is saved. And it's also telling there's no Jew or Gentile. That's what it refers to, circumcision and uncircumcision. When it talks about no male or no female, it's referring to the dichotomy, the right-hand order and the left-hand order. It's referring to the passive nature and the aggressive nature. In the pleroma, there is not aggression. There's only assertiveness, and there's no passiveness as well. There's only peacefulness and a state of repose. And so these are very different ideas, repose versus being passive, and assertive being aggressive. When we're in the pleroma, this male and female dichotomy is no longer necessary, you see. And that's the way we were from the beginning. And that's where the soul comes into play. Because in some sects of Gnosticism, they believe that the consorts were broken up into a male and female counterpart. And the soul was, not the physical body. Those souls were actually one consort body or one consort spirit that eternally always working together, but they were separated. And that's why people long to be with their quote-unquote soulmate. One is male and the other is female, but it means it in a metaphorical way, not in a physical way. That male or that female can come back in the form of a male physically or a female physically, or it could be a male and a female and a female as well. But it ultimately is playing out its need to come back together into the consort when it goes back to the pleroma. And the other thing it talked about here, but it's quite astounding if you pay attention very closely to each of these words, it says, neither angel nor man. So here is that part that we must understand. It's saying that when this kanoma goes, so goes all of the aeons that came down here. Those are called angels. The quote-unquote descended aeons that came into the kanoma are called angels. angels, or archangels, or archons, if you want to call them that. They are the ones that also will be redeemed from this realm, along with man. There will be no more man. There will only be humankind in the spiritual sense. What is the form of the one who did not exist at first? It will be found that he will exist. So saying, okay, so we don't have a flesh body, we don't have a soul, what's our form? And what is the nature of the one who was a slave? He will take a place with a free man. So talking about our essence will be one of liberty and freedom to be whatsoever we want. This is what it's saying. It's kind of leading you toward that. For they will receive the vision more and more by nature, not only by little words, so as to believe only through a voice that this is the way it is, that the restoration to that which used to be is a unity. If it means that we're unity, it means everybody's capable of what everybody else is capable of. Even if some are exalted because of the organization, since they have been appointed as causes of the things which have come into being, since they are more active as natural forces, and since they are desired because of these things, angels and men will receive the kingdom and the confirmation and the salvation. These then are the causes. So what it's referring to, ones that set forth to create an effect, essentially. That's what it's saying. So the effect here, it's saying that even if you were part of the organization, meaning the kanoma or the flesh realm, and you were attached to that, that was the cause to create the effect of the transcendence or the ascendancy back pleroma. Right? So it continues, about the one who appeared in flesh, they believed without any doubt that he is the Son of the unknown God, who was not previously spoken of and who could not be seen. Now here again, I just want to remind you that if you get anyone telling you that Gnostics do not believe that Christ came in the flesh, and we've seen several books already, if this is your first time listening to this channel, you'll see here, this is a Gnostic text. It says about the one, which of course the one is the Christ, who appeared in the flesh. They believe without any doubt that he is the Son of the unknown God, who was not previously spoken of and could not be seen. They abandoned their gods whom they had previously worshipped, and the lords who are in the heaven and on earth, before he had taken them up, and while he was still a child, they testified that he had already begun to preach. And when he was in the tomb as a dead man, the angels thought that he was alive, receiving life from the one who had died. They first desired their numerous services and wonders, which were in the temple on their behalf, to be performed continuously as confession. That is, it can be done on their behalf through their approach to him. So it's just talking about how Christ was like a testimony unto himself. Even those that wanted to resist him, when they came to him and heard him speak or saw or felt his energy, his essence, it was undeniable. And they wanted to hear his teachings. They wanted to be around him because he was like a confession, a testimony onto the light and the truth and the way. That preparation which they did not accept, they rejected because of the one who had not been sent from that place, but they granted to Christ. So this is kind of hinting at Jehovah or any other religions that tried to win them over, or like melt their hearts to love everyone and to do right and all those things, that even with all the laws and all of the coercions and the threats of hellfire, some people still couldn't get themselves to completely like embrace that. You know, it was just harsh and it just wasn't something that they could trust completely. And so it was more by word of mouth, and they would walk around as hypocrites because they would just kind of go and mimic, or go, it's Sunday, I have to go, so forth and so on. So even though they rejected those, but when Christ came, of whom they thought he exists in that place from which they have come along with him, a place of gods and lords whom they serve, worshipped and ministered to in the names of which they had received on loan, they were given to the one who is designated to them properly. That's how they ultimately ended up. They ended up with Christ anyway, even to their own surprise. However, after his assumption, they had the experience to know that he is their Lord, over whom no one else is Lord. They gave him their kingdoms, they rose from their thrones, they were kept from their crowns. So they humbled themselves. None of those things were important to them anymore. He, however, revealed himself to them for the reasons which we have already spoken of, their salvation, and the return to a good thought until companion and the angels, and the abundance of good which they did with it. And one example, a good example of that is the Apostle Paul, who was literally like persecuting Christians and killing them in the dozens when he was on his road to Damascus and he was interjected, or he was visited by Christ. That was just a profound turnaround instantly. He was a very cold man, very hard-hearted, but he meets Christ, and can you imagine? He had followed the Jehovah God God, and he had followed all these Sadducees and Pharisees, and he went out of his way to even like kill Christians. But then Christ visits him and says, "Why do you persecute me?" And then from that point forward, it was a miraculous turnaround. Thus they were entrusted with the services which benefit the elect, bringing their iniquity up to heaven. They tested them eternally for the lack of humility from the inerrancy of the creation, continuing on the behalf till all come to life and leave life while their bodies remain on earth, serving all their, we don't know what it says here, sharing with them in their sufferings and persecutions and tribulations which were brought upon the saints in every place. As for the servants of the evil one, though evil is worthy of destruction, they are in we don't know what it says here, but because of which is above all the world, which is their good thought and the fellowship, the church will remember them as good friends and faithful servants. So that's the evil ones are worthy of destruction, but they're remembered as good friends and faithful servants. Because you have to remember that it's not about good and evil, because that's a machination or creation of the demiurge. Think of it like when you're playing a game, and a war game, for example, and you're with a friend and you're fighting against a friend. Maybe it's a competitive game. At the end of the game, you don't like hate each other, or you don't still think of each other as the enemy. So the point here is that until you can really embrace and believe that this realm is a game, it's not the real realm, it's a place of illusions, then you're going to really attach yourself to anything that happens, whether it's death, whether it's people killing each other, or bombs are being dropped, so forth and so on. And it's going to really infuriate you, and it's going to be hard for you to be at peace, because you don't really realize that all of this is game, you see. It's all part of a game. And it's here so that you can learn from this experience and become more agile, become more capable spiritually, so forth and so on, and grow into your name, and to find who you are, to find that part of God, so that God can become more known through each one of us. And the church will remember them as good friends and faithful servants, once she had received redemption from the one who gives requital. Then the grace which is in the bridal chamber and in her house, and in this thought of the giving, and the one who is Christ is the one with her, and the expectation of the Father of the totality, since she will produce for them angels as guides and servants, they will think pleasant thoughts. They are services for her. She will give them their requital for all that which the aeons will think about. He is an emanation from them, so that just as Christ did his will, which he brought forth and exalted the greatnesses of the church and gave them to her, so will she be a thought for these. And so she is Sophia, and that's wisdom gained. So first is the Gnosis and the intelligence that's gained from the knowledge of good and evil. And because we're experiencing that, not just simply not given the knowledge, through the experience, we gain Sophia, which is the wisdom. So you must think of knowledge and wisdom as two different things. Wisdom is knowledge that's been experienced and on a level that is internalized, because you walk the walk, so to speak. And Gnosis is that walk. So knowledge is just knowledge. It's like some numbers on a chalkboard. Gnosis is the walk of that knowledge that's on the chalkboard. And at the end of the journey is the wisdom part, because you've gained that experience. So it's the Gnosis, it's the knowledge, the Gnosis, and then the wisdom that you gain from that. So here's what it's talking about. At the end, Sophia is brought up at the end here, because that's what it all started. It all started with her, and then it ends with her. It all started with Sophia seeking wisdom, and in the end she gains that wisdom. And through that aeon of Sophia, we all, as a collective human being, as a unitary process, experience that will of Sophia that was blessed by God the Father in the Kenoma and made available through the Christ. So this is how it works. And so will she be a thought for these. And to men he gives their eternal dwelling places, which they will dwell, leaving behind the attraction toward the defect, and that's the attachment to this realm, leaving behind that defect, while the power of the pleroma pulls them up, and the greatness of the generosity and the sweetness of the aeon which pre-exists. So it's talking about the unitary aeon that pre-exists, that had always been there to assist man or the church back to the pleroma. And then we'll understand their generosity and their sweetness. Remember, we talked about at the beginning of this book that God gave the aeons generosity and sweetness so they wouldn't be envious of the human. Okay, so we will in turn recognize that generosity and sweetness and give gratitude back to the aeons. This is the nature of the entire begetting of those whom he had when he shone on them in a light which he revealed, and that's the Gnosis he revealed. This is that light. Just as his, and we don't know what it says, which will be, We don't know what it says. So to his Lord, while the change alone is in those who have changed. So that's the significant part. The change alone is in those that have changed. It's the transformation that's being talked about that brings life. Because if there's no movement, if there's inertia, there's death. So this transformation is the process of life happening. And there's 6 lines missing, which we don't know, by him, which we don't know, said, why the Hylics will remain until the end for destruction, since they will not give forth for their names, if they would return once again to that which will not be. So this means that if you are a Hylic and by the end of your life, then you're not going to receive your name, because you haven't recognized yourself. You haven't recognized that part of yourself that's God. So you don't know who you are. You don't know what you're going to contribute to the pleroma, to the fuller understanding of what God is. And so you're not going to go back. You're going to come back. That's what it talks about. Since they will not give forth for their names, if they would return once again to that which will not be. And what is that which will not be? That which will not be is this realm. At some point, it will not be anymore. But they'll continue to return so long as they don't know their name. As they were not. We don't know. It's really broken up here at the end. But they were of use in the time that they were in it among them, although they were not at first, if to do something else concerning the control which they have of the preparation before them. For though I continually use these words, I have not understood his meaning. Some elders hymn greatness. Now, I am not going to even begin to attempt what it means here. There's just too many words to make any sense of that last part. 6 lines missing, and really the rest of this is pretty much in that same vein. As the last paragraph is sort of a closure. All angels, word, and the sound of a trumpet, he will proclaim the great complete amnesty from the beauteous east in the bridal chamber, which is the love of God the Father, according to the power which of the greatness, the sweetness of him, since he reveals himself to the greatnesses, his goodness, the praise, the dominion, and the glory through the Lord the Savior, the Redeemer of all those belonging to the one filled with love through his Holy Spirit, from now through all generations, forever and ever. Amen. And that ends the Tripartite Tractate. So we've learned a lot from this incredible book. It's just voluminous and filled with tons of jewels. I do suggest that you go back and listen to the other videos. If you haven't done so, I do encourage you to go listen to them, because this book is just filled with jam-packed. So it's going to be difficult to just listen to it once and really get all the jewels that are in this book. And it's just really worthwhile to get it. Become second nature. That just natural to you to be able to just, much like the proto-Orthodox, they walk around and they say their verses, verse so-and-so, so-and-so. Well, of course, these are newer books. We don't have them broken up into verses and chapters, so forth at this point. But the concepts, the general concepts in the different paragraphs, so I've broken them up into 10 different videos, and also it's broken them into 16 different sections. And the main thing, as long as you get 2 or 3 strong points out of each one of those sections, I think you're going to be able to respond well to any questions that people may have, whether it's out of curiosity or it's out of an adversarial disposition or intent toward you. All right, with that, thanks for listening as we close this book, and we're going to be picking up with a continuation of the video series that I just started a couple days ago, Dispelling the Myths of Christian Gnosticism, or Gnostic Christians. And also, we're going to be starting a new book, and the next book in the series is titled The Secret Book of John. So stay with us, because that book is completely different from this book, and it is filled with just as much in an even smaller space. So you'll want to tune into that, because it's not one of those books that's easy to swallow, because it's not written in this style where it explains everything. It's very descriptive and colorful. It's more like very informational. It's jam-packed with a lot of information. Unless you have some background on all of the terms that are being used and the allegories and so forth and so on, the symbolisms or the parallels to different concepts and ideas, then it's going to be hard for you to really get much from that book. So I do encourage you to follow me along into that next book, and that book may actually take us 10 videos as well, even though it's probably a third or even less in terms of how many words are in that book. All right, with that, stay safe, and we'll talk again soon. Bye.